All right, welcome back to the SSL Family Dad channel. Excited to give you guys another update on the log cabin style raised bed here in the greenhouse. It has been 100 days since we put seeds in the ground, and our plants have been growing wonderfully in here. And so we're going to take you through today and give you kind of an update on how everything is growing, what is ready to harvest. We might eat some food and test it out, see how it tastes, which is what's most important, really, right? I also have this new pH and moisture meter. It's just a cheap one that I got from with a Mars Hydro grow light that was just we just set up in our indoor garden. I did a video on that last week. So let's stick this in the ground in here and see what our pH is, what our soil moisture is between different areas of the raised bed. Is it drying out in certain areas? Is it not? Also, the direct or pure composted manure, is it too hot or too acidic for our plants? We're going to check that out and see where our pH is at. We'll talk a little bit about pH and how that affects vegetables and growing plants of any sort, really. And we'll also go through and make some adjustments and fine-tune a few things here. But so let's take a look at the garden and see how well things have been growing in here. All right, so at the beginning of the garden here, we have our carrot patch. Now, if you've been following along, this carrot patch, I had planted all out and was about to ready to thin it when the whole injury accident thing happened, and I wasn't able to get out here and thin it. So look how thick this stuff is growing. It's a carrot jungle. So we're going to have a lot of carrots that are thin and kind of squirrely looking growing together. But let's pull one out here and see what they look like. Oh yeah, they're thick in there. Can't even get it out. So we got a short one. There's a comparison to my finger. These will grow quite a bit longer, given more time. So it has been 100 days, like I said, since we planted this seed, and I bet you there's a lot of them in here that you can see. Usually the tallest greens on top of here are going to be your biggest carrots. So let's see if you can see in here or not, but we've got 2 carrots right down there growing right next to each other, and it doesn't really hurt them too much. We'll pull one of these out. That's a pretty good sized carrot right there. A little bigger. It's a hand-sized carrot. But this is a great time to pick these carrots because they are at their highest sugar content when they're younger, and I bet you these things just taste amazing. So we'll taste some of these here in a little bit. So even though this whole patch wasn't thinned out, I think it's going to give us a real good harvest. Some of them are going to be smaller and thinner, but it looks like the rest of them are pretty good size. So they'll taste good either way. So we still have this open patch here. I never replanted that, and so we still have time to plant something else in there. But right next to it, we've got our cabbage, and this is the first time that I have been able to actually grow cabbage without slugs and all kinds of other problems with bugs and things like that. There were a couple of them in here, but this kale is in the way, and so we're going to have to do something about that today. The kale is doing really well. Kale always does really well. There's really not a whole lot you need to do with it besides give it some good soil and some water, and it'll grow. This is taking over this whole area here, and I think what we're going to do is thin this down to 1 row. We'll do that here in just a minute. The Swiss chard, well, it's been slowly dying off here in the heat, but it is time for the Swiss chard to go. So we'll cut that out of here and we'll feed it out to the goats. We don't need that stuff. But the green bean patch, 100 days, and this thing is just absolutely loaded from front to back, just with beans in here. I mean, they're just everywhere. These ones are actually a little bit further along than I would like. The best tasting green beans are when they're just about like this. If you can see the seed in there protruding that much, then you've probably waited just a little too long. Now, not that these won't be great. You can cook these, you can eat these fresh, whatever you want to do, but they do not have as good of a flavor as, say, this one does. These young ones are sweeter, and the seeds aren't quite as thick in there, so you don't have quite a big bite of just the actual bean seed itself. And these are great to cook up, throw some butter on, and a good side dish, or just eat them fresh. And then you can see all the yellow popping into the bean patch and everything over here. This is our potatoes, and these are dying off now because it is their time to do that. They have already flowered and put some seeds on, and they're dying off and ready to be harvested here. So we probably could dig in here and grab some potatoes. Oh, I see them popping out of the surface. Look at that. Yep. These are purple potatoes. So this one's kind of wrecked because it was sitting out on the surface here. A lot of these are, but there's probably ready to harvest these, so we can dig in here and get out some potatoes. Looks like this is about the size they get. They do get, some of them will be bigger than that, but This is a pretty good size. These will taste real good. And then we come to the tomato jungle. So there's 3 different varieties of tomatoes in here, and I don't know, I'll try to get a clip of when I planted them. They're planted in kind of 3 rows here. This is 4 foot wide, the raised bed from this side to that side. So there's 4 square feet, you know, in each planting zone. And we do have quite a few tomatoes in here. They're starting to grow pretty good. You can kind of see them hanging throughout here. Those are probably our Ace 55s or maybe some beefsteaks. I can't remember what I planted. I know we've got some Romas on the other side, but there's quite a few tomatoes in here. And I'm just kind of letting this, you can see it filled up it's all the way to the top of the plastic here. Now this plastic isn't really removable because of the way I have it clamped. I could take it all apart and take the plastic off, but I really would rather the focus on this being a winter grow system, and so I just kind of want to leave it alone so I don't wreck that plastic this year. But I'm just going to let these overflow on this side. We'll let them just kind of fall out here, and they can grow along the ground or whatever. These would easily be 6, maybe 8 feet tall if they were just growing straight up. And down at the end here, my first time ever, I have an eggplant. And it looks like our first fruit is forming here. I don't think there's any other ones in here. This is the biggest one. There's a couple other eggplants in here, but look at that. Isn't that cool? I've never grown an eggplant. They really take a long time to grow. And we don't eat eggplant really anyway, but I just wanted to grow and see how they do. They're a beautiful looking plant when they fruit and flower. So there's the heater that heats this thing in the wintertime. If you haven't been following along, this is hooked up to our outdoor wood boiler, and we've got some hot water that circulates in here and goes through this radiator. It's right here and heats this whole tunnel. And on this side we've got our bell peppers, and you can see quite a few fruit forming here and flowering. Now a lot of people asked about pollination. So with most of these plants, these bell peppers and tomatoes and things like that, these are a self-pollinator, and all they really need is a little tap of the stem or some wind blowing through here. Even when you water them, they shake around, and the pollen will go from these outside things to the middle there, and you can see that one's already started to form a little fruit inside. And so you don't really need pollinators for any of this stuff. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have bees and butterflies and things come through, but you'll get a pretty decent pollination just if you come out here every once in a while and just tap the plants around, shake things around a little bit, and pollination should be pretty decent that way. We've got some Roma tomatoes forming over here, and everything's flowering and fruiting pretty good. These have already set, so fruit's already set on those. And I never really thinned any of these out, so we've got a couple bell peppers there's 2 of them growing right next to each other, and so we'll see how that does. I don't think it'll be too bad. And we've got I think there's a couple more over here that are growing real close to each other, and the tomatoes are growing, you know, over them. I just keep pushing them back up into the middle, or trimming the branches off along the edges, just so the tomatoes don't kind of overtake the peppers here. I did plant these tomatoes, as I said before, super duper dense, and that's just to keep weeds and other things out. I'd rather have an extra tomato plant grow than a bunch of weeds. And if it produces a couple extra tomatoes for us, then great. If not, then that's fine too. And you can see everything looks real healthy in here. It's just looking great. Beans here on the other side, and the Swiss chard and the kale are just coming down the other side of the bed now. Can't remember how many kale I planted in this row, but I'm pretty sure I can at least eliminate 1 row next to the cabbage. But look how well this cabbage is doing. Look at that. You can tell how when you see leaves like that are real glossy, you know, they've got that real nice healthy sheen on them. You can see that in the kale here as well. But this is a super healthy leaf. No bug damage, you know, nothing. It's just been growing really well in here. So I want to get in here and we'll thin out these kale plants, but man, I'm gonna try one of these carrots out first. Nice new Leatherman Wave, favorite tool. We don't need to wash this stuff off, just a little wipe. A little dirt never hurt. Those are perfect. Taste the sugar to them, they're sweet. Oh yeah, there's nothing like a healthy carrot. We'll be right back. So the soil mix that we have in here is almost completely composted manure. There is a little bit of peat moss. I think there was 1 bag of peat moss in here, maybe 2 for the whole bed. I can't remember. So not much when you compare how many cubic feet of dirt are in here. I did put some straw along the bottom, and that's really it. That's all that's in here. And so we'll go ahead and stick this meter down in the soil a little bit, So it looks like as we go in a little bit deeper here, I push that thing way down, so we're about 10 inches into the soil here. Still moving a little bit, but looks like we're getting closer to 6.5 pH, and that really is an ideal place to be. So that's down well into the deeper end of the root zone of these plants. The majority of the surface looks like it's more towards the pH of 7, which is about neutral, and that's great, actually. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Any pH between 6 and 6.5, I would say even as low as 5.5 is really great. Let's check our moisture. Okay, it says it's very wet down there. So these plants have lots of water down below the surface, even if it's dry at the top. So different plants are going to be affected by pH differently, and a lot of people are worried if they put, you know, too much compost directly into your garden or whatever, you know, you're going to raise the acidity, or I guess we could say lower the acidity, so it's more acidic, and then plants won't grow well. But that idea really is kind of silly. What you really want to be careful with is adding wood ash to your garden. You add a lot of wood ash to your garden, you can very easily raise your pH up above 7, and that is not ideal for most plants. Most of your plants like a little bit of a more acidic soil. They like, you know, even tomatoes, you can go down to as low as 5, and anywhere between 5, 5.5, maybe 6, and they'll grow really well. They kind of grow well in an acidic soil, but most everything will grow right at about 6.5 or 6. Everything's going to grow really well there. The acidity has to do with how the nutrients are able to uptake into the roots and the different chemical reactions that happen with nutrients moving around, and also your living organisms in the soil and all those kinds of things. You want all that stuff to thrive. And I don't think that it's ever an issue putting too much compost, even compost that isn't broken down all the way. Mix that in with your soil, it's going to be fine. By the time those plants are growing from seed, the worms and bugs and everything else are going to break all that stuff down. It's going to be great soil. So you never really have to worry, in my opinion anyway, you never really have to worry about adding too much compost or you know, too much manure or anything like that to a garden. I just don't think that's ever an issue, but I would be careful with wood ash. Unless you have a really bad pH problem where you've somehow lowered your pH down to like 4.5 or something like that, I would never add too much wood ash. Mix a little bit in. Hardwood, wood ashes contain a lot of potassium, and that's good for the soil, but they will raise that pH. So just something to think about. Those little pH meters, I'll put one in the description on Amazon. I didn't find that exact one, but the one that's looks identical to it, but it also measures something else. It has 3-way, measures pH, moisture, and something else. So you check that one out. They're only like, I think, $8 or $9. It's not much. Let's tackle this the kale problem here and get it out of the way of this cabbage. I've got lots of kale, too much for me anyway, and so I'd like to see these cabbage grow really well. I've never been able to grow good cabbage, so let's cut some of this kale down. The goats are going to love it, and we'll eat some of it, but I can't eat that much kale, so we'll feed it to the animals here, and we'll see some baby goats, see how they like it. Well, I don't think that's too bad for 100 days of growing, especially growing, you know, since, what was it, March or April, whenever we started planting seeds here in Michigan. that is a pretty darn good little harvest, I think, for June. Normally we wouldn't have any vegetables really ready until July or August, so it's nice to get an early start on things and get some produce going. And with this system here, my plan is to create kind of a sustainable growing operation here, where I will be able to, now that I kind of know how long it takes for these crops to harvest, what we liked the most, what we didn't, what we used the most of, and all that kind of stuff, I can start to replant this in increments and start to rotate things through 30, 60, 90, 100, 120 days and replant and regrow. And so that we'll always have some form of food coming out of this thing. You know, this is just half of, not even half, this is just a little bit of you know, the potatoes that we had in there. I'll leave all the rest of these potatoes in the ground. I just harvested a few. We've got all these carrots. I mean, this is just a tiny little bit just for us to eat today and tomorrow, and I can come out here and just grab some, you know, every day or whenever we're ready to eat some. This green beans was only probably, you know, 2 buckets worth. This was maybe just 1 square foot of beans that I harvested. So there's so much food left in here and so much food still to eat. And so this is a good start, I think, to a kind of sustainable food system. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the updates and the update today. Soil pH, very important in harvesting, when to harvest stuff. It's important to know when to harvest things, what things are going to regrow, what things are going to grow, produce, and die, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed. I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think of the garden? Questions, comments, any of that stuff, throw it down below. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button on the video, guys. Always makes a huge difference. And of course, subscribe if this is your first time here. Love to have you follow along. Just reach down, hit that red subscribe button and the bell next to it for notifications when we post new content. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one.